Hello, my name is Dr. Rashid Muller, and co-authoring this article was Lieutenant Colonel Corey E. Thomas, United States Army JAG Car, who is now connected to the National Guard Bureau. I would like to present on behalf of the two of us today here at the International Conference on Research and Management and Technovation 2020 on the topic that we wrote about, which was election infrastructure security, grants and reimbursement to the states for usage of their National Guards in the state active duty status to provide cybersecurity for federal elections. So here's the problem statement. Because the presidential and congressional elections are state administered vehicles with the federal nexus of the United States, the government should reimburse and provide grants to states when they're using their National Guards in the state active duty status to perform cybersecurity assessments and testing before the election, provide general cybersecurity during the election if there is an actual attack on election day, and then provide any post-election support as necessary and appropriate. Long story short, what happens is there's a chain for cyber, which is a new realm for the United States and pretty much the world. And within that realm, we are experiencing attacks against all the critical infrastructures. So in 2016, with the presidential election in the United States, we saw there was a Russian influence on our attacks on our national election. So this is public information that was found by the intelligence community. So therefore, for the 2020 election, the United States took some precautions between 2016 and now to ensure that those attacks would not directly affect our election, which is created the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency called CISA. So once you kind of go through the paper, you'll see a lot of jargon with respect to what Lieutenant Colonel Thomas, who is an attorney, did a great deal of background work in assisting. And I kind of came up with the idea because my background is election security while I'm working in Congress. And so here we are. As you go through the paper, there were some suggested steps that we wanted to bring to your attention in the paper. The first step is that the decision makers, we're talking about the military, and we're talking about primarily the Congress and the executive branch, which is Office of Management and Budget, they have to provide some money. So they must develop an election infrastructure protection plan that effectively utilizes the best access in a whole of nation approach to help meet the three policy goals of election security, which are access, integrity, and security. What we have now is gaps because we're using our military reserve units which are primarily our cyber capabilities in the United States, because they're the trained professionals, right? And they are pretty much providing a service to their country because these are professionals who work in the cyber unit, but they're not active military. They are professionals like myself who may come on to military reserve unit to ensure, and I'm bringing my skill set to ensure that the election is not secure. So we're not really getting paid for what we do. We're getting paid for our ranking, okay, and whatever military rank we have, okay? And so those groups are Cyber Yankee, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. And then the second step is once the decision makers agree on how the best to approach this, they need to do some real soul searching and pay the people for what they're worth, okay? They need to collectively address how to best support the states. There are 50 states in the union within the United States. And so they need to come up with some money, long story short. So the article digs deeper into the jargon and we are pretty much requesting this research kind of is dealing with making the paper is making a debate and an argument to how best secure the cyber cycle, particularly with the federal elections. So our National Guard cyber operators. So historically, the National Guard has been the first military responder to the homeland. Our branches of the service, you know, the Navy, the Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard, all around the United States, all around the world. But the National Guard, when in time of war, they are pretty much the first guard, the first set of military personnel to be activated. The active duty are already doing their thing and are stationed wherever they are around the world. But the National Guard, which we call the weekend warriors, so they have 2 months of training during the summertime, and then 2 months. I'm going to say 2 weeks of training during the summertime, and then 1 weekend out of the month any other time. So what we need to do is, you know, utilize the Guard to not only be, you know, factored into the Consolidated Election Infrastructure Security Plan, but the government really needs to provide some costs, particularly when it comes to cyber operations here, and particularly the federal election. What happens is if there's an incident with the federal election, then the Guard is responsible. They coordinated with United States Cybercom, the Adjutant General of the territory or the state, and then also the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, which is on the federal side. So in the paper, we go into a deep dive with respect to what the legislation should look like. Okay, here's what the current legislation is. Here are the recommendations. And again, Cyber Yankee, as I talked about a little bit earlier, has been in effect since 2016. You got Lieutenant Colonel Woody Groton and a couple of other guys up there at the National Guard, the National Guard, that are doing some extremely great work up there. And it's approximately about 4,000 people around the United States who are Army and Air Force. And then you may have some Navy Reserve units, some Coast Guard Reserve units, but it's primarily the Army and the Air Force. So here we have the election cycle. Okay, and in the paper we talk about, you know, the 3 stages of the election cycle, which the Guard is actively working on. So for instance, this is not just an election day event. They are working probably 2 to 3 months before the election, which is part of the pre-election cycle, okay? And then the actual election day, they're working on it. And then post-election, making sure that all the numbers are correct. So they are pretty much, you can pretty much expect that they're still working right now, considering the contentious election that we just had and the president, 45, saying that there's been issues with our counts, things of that nature. So that Guard is still working to this very day, and the election was back close to 2 to 3 weeks ago, okay? So we're just going to jump right to the recommendations that I talked about. The Congress should modify and pass the currently proposed Election Security Act. And so you go into the paper, we're going to say, hey, the language contained in the suggested modification should be fashioned after the Stafford Disaster Relief Act. So what happened with the Stafford Act, it was a FEMA entity. And it says if things occur, we will pay money. So when we've had these natural disasters, Hurricane Katrina, the Stafford Disaster Act reimbursed the National Guard for activating, assisting with building critical infrastructures back, particularly with FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. What they did is they kind of went in, restored order to its natural purpose, back to where it was with the Hurricane Katrina. But the National Guard Bureau was very crucial in doing policing, assisting in construction, and really kind of containing the water with the water main, with the levees down in New Orleans, just to give you an idea, okay? The law should also authorize reimbursement of the states for costs incurred to provide National Guard personnel to respond to any federal cyber attack on the federal election system. So this is kind of like what we do between NSA and just at Fort Meade, cyber incident response. But we pay those people on a daily basis, and they are actually employed. Again, the National Guard, they're volunteers 1 weekend out of the month, 2 weekends out the summer to kind of come and help and assist. But when it's an election cycle, they should be reimbursed for it. And then second, Congress should draft a law similar to, United States Code 10, Section 275, directing the Secretary of Defense and the National Guard Bureau in partnership with the Director of CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, to prescribe policy that not only aligns with the new law, but also specifically authorizes the National Guard in their active duty status to perform cybersecurity functions in the 3 phases of the election security process that I kind of talked about already. In conclusion, the U.S. Constitution, the framers tasked the states with the responsibility of the federal election. So long story short, what we're looking for are changes to the law, okay? I go back to the Constitution here, and Lieutenant Colonel Thomas really did this some good background and talked about in the paper making some amendments to the Constitution and United States Code. And long story short, what we're looking for is passage of new legislation that addresses explicitly provision of grants and reimbursements, okay, to the states for the use of their National Guard while they're performing cybersecurity activities during a federal election. Long story short, cyber is somewhat taking over all of our daily lives. No matter what country we live in, we're all connected via the internet. Protecting that internet, protecting our personal information, protecting our privacy is what is most important. I want to thank you for allowing me to present this paper. Have a great conference.